Hi, in this tutorial, I would like to briefly describe how you could go about the result analysis for the case study that we did, namely the air construct case study. So here is a little table and chart that I've shown. And as you can see, in the table here, we have the R, E, S, U, L, and T, and each of the letters, R, E, S, U, L, T, has factors and influences or influencers. So for example, you might have some factors that influence resolve, some factors that influence environment and signature and you and learning and so on. Just as an example, the environment could have politics as one of the key factors, maybe decision-making styles, communication, IT infrastructure, and so on. So you would have to identify two or three. So let's say two or three factors in each of these six categories. So two or three for resolve, two or three for environment, and so on. Actually, three would be a good idea. Now, if you recall, during the virtual session we had last week, somebody asked the question, what if an influencer or factor is in more than one of these six categories or six letters? That's perfectly okay. So for example, communication or the lack thereof might affect environment, it could affect learning, it might even affect the team and so on. So there could be factors that are in more than one of these six. So something could occur in two or maybe even three. So that's okay. Don't feel like you have to come up with unique factors and influencers for each of the six letters. Now, once you've listed the factors and influencers, you can give them a weight. For example, there may be some factors that you believe might be more significant or less significant than the others. And you can restrict this to each letter, so you don't have to worry, across the board what the weight is. But let's say you looked at the two or three factors or influencers you put in R, resolve, then within the resolve category, you can give a weight. So, let's say I put a weight of 3 for this one, and a weight of 2 for that, and a weight of 1. So, for example, you could just have them as low, medium, high, and you could give a score of 3 for a high, a score of 2 for medium, and a score of 1 for a low. Or you could have a 1 to 5 scale or 1 to 10 scale, whatever you want. And then you could give a score. So the higher the score, it means the greater the favorability of that factor. So let's say you gave some factor here in resolve, let's say 40. It means that, and let's say this 40 is out of 100. So let's say the score is on a 1 to 100 scale. So if you gave a score of 40, that would mean that the resolve is, or at least this factor, the first factor that you listed under resolve, is not very favorable. Its score is low, it's a 40. Whereas if you gave this an 80, it would mean that you think that that particular factor is affecting resolve favorably. and maybe you give this a 50. And then you can get a composite score based on this. So how do you get a composite score? Well, it's your classic weighted average. So you could take, for example, 3 times 40, and then 2 times 80, and 1 times 50. So that would be, let's see, 120, 160, and 50. And what does that add up to? That adds up to 330, right? The 330. And then if you add up the weights, 3 plus 2 plus 1, that's 6. So 330 divided by 6 is 55. So that would be your composite score here. And then, of course, you can take this composite score and map it. So if this were the R-axis, so to speak, then you could map the 55 as being right there, right? Between 50 and 60. So this is how you could do the result analysis. And of course, you do the same thing for E, S, U, L, and T. So let's talk now that I've given you some idea of how to go about the details. Let's talk about the high-level approach to the case analysis. So you will read the case, which I suppose you've done, and I hope you'll do if you haven't. So read the case carefully, maybe twice if needed, and then pick the project in question, the one that was for Aero Services, the project that's described in detail. Pick that project, and for that project, come up with this result analysis, meaning based on the facts and the data, how would you rate this project on each of the R, E, S, U, L, and T, and why? So that's the first and the key part of the assignment. The second part of the assignment would be an assessment on your part of what you think the impact would have been if, let's say, prior to taking on the project or prior to planning the project, or maybe in the early stages of planning, if the team in the case study, if the team had done an analysis like this, do you think it would have made any difference in how they managed it? So, for example, let's say they did their analysis and it showed that they were kind of here on each of the 6. So pretty low scores on each of the 6. Okay? Suppose they had seen this at the beginning of the project. Would they have then been motivated to do things differently? Would doing this result analysis in the beginning or in the early stages of the project have spurred them to make changes, to be more alert, to be on the lookout for issues, maybe to restructure or rethink how they managed it, how they planned it? In other words, what is the utility of this result analysis? Because if you recall, the whole point of the analysis was to make the project airworthy. In the analogy that we gave of an airplane, the project being the airplane, before the airplane takes off, you want to make sure that the conditions are right, that there's no major headwinds, or if there are headwinds, then at least you know about them and perhaps you have some foreknowledge on how to deal with them. And that's always helpful as a leading indicator. as opposed to being reactive and dealing with issues when you encounter them. Hence, the purpose here is to reflect on how this project might have turned out if this result analysis was done. And as you can probably attest to, analyses like these are rarely done. And how long does it take? It doesn't take a heck of a lot of time. I think it just needs a few people huddled together in a room that make some assessment of where things stand, where the issues might be, what kind of conditions might the project run into midstream, and so on. So that's the second part of the assignment, to reflect on how the performing of the result analysis, or how performing the result analysis would have made things different, if you think it would have indeed made things different. And if not, why not? And the third part of the assignment is your assessment of whether this result analysis might be applicable for projects that you have. So a brief summary of how you might apply it. And when I say you, I'm referring, of course, to the team in general. And I realize that you all work in different organizations, so you don't have to give me details about your project, but just in general, do you, the members of your team, do you see utility for this in the projects you manage? And if you were to apply this, how might it influence how you prepare for, how you plan for, how you execute, how you monitor and control, and maybe even close a project? Because remember that in learning here, there could be aspects of good closure. And so a low score on learning might alert you to issues and help you perhaps to do a better job of closing or handing over the batons. If you remember the animation of handing over the batons for closing. So if you had a low learning score, you would then focus more on closing, because that's one of the vehicles that promotes good learning. So anyway, that is the gist of what you have to do for this particular assignment. Now, in terms of the logistics, I am going to create a set of group discussion areas, much like we did in Module 5, so you can discuss there. In terms of your output, you can have an output very similar to this, and remember that is the first part of the assignment. And in your second and third part of the assignment, you can just have a brief write-up, maybe, a half page for the second part, another half page for the third part, so a total of a page, and you can post that in your team discussion area. Now, another thing that I think we could do in week 6, and we purposely kept week 6 a little flexible and open, is to work on that project plan discussion. So what you could do is, as teams, discuss what you might do when putting together a project plan. In other words, what do you think goes into a project plan? Now, you can do this as teams, you can do it individually. I'm not really particular about, how you group among yourselves, but I'd like each of you to think about what goes into a good project management plan. How is a good project management plan structured? What do you think the sections of the plan should be? What would you put in each section? And this is a general outline. So you don't have to actually uh, give me a plan for a specific project, but you can just outline what you think goes in a plan, the sections and what goes in each section, not in a lot of detail, but I'm thinking, maybe a couple of pages write up. And if you would prefer to do this write up as a team and post it as a team, that is fine too. Or if you want a little, change of scene and you don't want to work with one big team, maybe a few of you can team up, and they don't have to be the same members of the team that you had earlier. Maybe you can, mix and mingle a little bit, get to know other team members so you can team up and work on it. I only ask that in your submission in the discussion area that you write your names. So if two of you teamed up, then you just post under both of you. Of course, one of you can post it, so it'll show up as one of you having posted it, but you could have 2 or 3 or 4 names on it so that I know that it's really a joint output from all of you. Alternatively, if you choose to work in teams, then maybe you can use the team discussion areas that I'm creating for this result assignment and also post the project management plan output there. So I think that's about all I have to say here. I will be putting some more details in the classroom. And so between this lecture and the classroom, I think you have enough information to complete the result assignment and work a little bit on what goes into a project management plan. Okay, I think I will end on that note. And as always, don't feel that this tutorial or this lecture is the end of our interaction. You can always post something in the classroom if you have a question, in questions for instructor, or you can email me if you need to, or even call me if you think that is more appropriate and would help you answer your question either more quickly or more clearly. Okay? Bye-bye.